It's interesting how many people have shared a very similar experience, and that is when they were younger, when they were a kid, they were very out there and they were very free flowing in their personality. They had a lot to give, they had a lot of energy, and they very much were involved in the social dynamics, and they didn't really pay too much mind with how they were perceived. And some people might attribute this to a childlike ignorance, but I actually don't think that's the case at all because there are adults who never lost that. And I do think more than anything else, it's an environment that makes a person dim their light rather than a person naturally coming into their own and choosing to do that. There's multiple reasons that we can go over this, and I'm going to first address what I think is inherently going on in the environment that maybe made a lot of us do that. And in another sense, I'm going to, of course, explain how we can dig ourselves out of that hole. I think we, as a society, especially in the United States, for my people and my listeners who are tuning in from other countries, maybe you can tell me how it is where you are. But I think we've built a culture and society that very much emphasizes and rewards being quote unquote too cool, being unattainable, unapproachable. And this is very much in the game and in the swing of all the things. And what we'll see is this game isn't very rewarding. There's always going to be a bigger fish. There's always going to be someone more important. There's always going to be someone with more money or with more status, whatever it is. That's the game that you can choose to play, or you can choose to not play the game and instead aim for a more authentic approach in all relationships, in all situations and environments in your life. So that's, I think, an important distinction to make is that many of us grew up in an environment where you are forced to behave in a certain way to achieve the social engagement and I guess you can say the social rewards that you want. You don't want to be an outcast. You don't want to be pushed to the side. You don't want to spend all your time alone. And so very early on, you start to develop a defense tactic and defense mechanisms based on the experiences that you had. Maybe a close friend starts to grow distant from you because they think you're too much. You're too loud or you cause too much of a scene, whatever it might be. And we automatically assume, it's just the way our brains work, that from that moment, especially when we learn something like that at a young age, that there's inherently something wrong with how we're acting, rather than possibly flipping the coin and questioning if that person was projecting their own insecurity onto us. And so the chain is created. It's just people passing on their insecure projection onto others. And I don't mean insecure in a bad way because everyone's learning it from somewhere, right? I don't think anyone should be villainized here or we should be pointing the finger at anyone because anyone that's telling you to quiet down or dim your light or, be more cool, calm, and collected, there's probably a 5% chance they actually have your best interest in mind and they want you to maybe grow up and conduct yourself in a better way. But I think for most of us who are now kind of trying to live more freely without overthinking our behaviors, I think more so, 95% of the time, it was more of a case of we were probably just being an extroverted kid and someone so happened to think that whatever had happened to them in terms of them, someone dimming their light, is going to happen to them again as a result of you putting yourself out there and you being loud and whatever else. So this is where we learn it, whether it's from family, whether it's from friends, whether it's from relationships. It doesn't take much, especially when we're younger, to dim our light. All someone has to do is tell you you're too loud, you're too much, you're annoying. You know, are you ever going to stop talking? And I'm not trying to get personal here. I saw a social media post, and those were kind of the quotes that were aligned with the theme I'm talking about right now. So if you want to ask where I'm drawing it from, I'm drawing it from there. I'm not, tapped into any sort of thing that you guys are not. I don't know. I'm just rambling. But Yeah, we learn that from a very young age, and we automatically assume it has much to do with us and not as much to do with an environment of insecurity and an environment of defense mechanisms and a fear of vulnerability. So, how do we tackle this as we get older? And it's important to realize the two distinctions I made at the very beginning, right? There's the game of status, there's the game of unapproachability and unattainability, and there's that whole game of sort of an inauthentic way of going about life where, you're only seeking things that are going to increase your public perception and your social value in a way, right? So if you want to play that game, everything I'm going to say is going to be null and void because I'm approaching this from an authentic point of view. I'm not approaching this and telling you that if you put yourself out there, everyone's going to accept you, everyone's going to like you, and, things are going to work out beautifully. I'm actually telling you that if you don't play that game, and I'm going to make an important distinction here in a minute, but if you don't play that game, the status game and the too cool game, if you don't play that, then what you're going to find is maybe a smaller circle, but of true and genuine real connections. And this is going to translate to everywhere in your life. It's going to translate into your career life. It's going to translate into the way you go about things. It's going to translate everywhere because when you feel solid in who you are as a person, you don't have to go home and take it off or leave the house and put it on. You're just you. You're always just you. And I know we talk about identity transformation all the time, and these things go hand in hand. If you're trying to improve yourself, you're still, the awareness of improving and whatever else. We don't have to get too deep into that, but whatever makes you feel good in expressing yourself authentically, whatever makes you feel emotionally free, that is your, I guess, highest alignment, if you want to call it. And whatever falls as a result of you be existing in this way is not meant for you anyway. If someone doesn't like who you are truly, then they never liked you, period. So what is the point in this whole entanglement? It's often a sense of attachment to a feeling that maybe they're giving us. Maybe you hold on to someone because you like them and you put on an act because you know that they might not like you for the way that you are. But this is a ticking time bomb. And this is where you kind of have to use logic, over emotional impulse. And I know that is difficult because you don't want to be left on your own. But when authenticity is matched with a sincere effort in terms of connection, I don't think that fear is as valid as we like to make it. And the distinction that I wanted to make is there is such thing as constructive criticism. There is such thing as behaving in a way that is negatively impacting others, and we can't deny that. But you have to have the awareness to be able to see. If the way you're acting is negatively affecting others, I mean, you must have the awareness to see that. And I have a relatively strong feeling that if you clicked on this video and you're listening literally right up until this point right now, that's probably not an issue. But if it is, and if somebody brings it to the table and it's warranted in a fair way, then give it a sort of neutral ear and try to see if there's any truth to it. But you need to be able to carve your own perception based on the reactions of others. If 1 in 10 people tell you something negative about you, you don't jump to the conclusion that that's the objective truth of what's happening. And I'm not trying to create a diluted sense of reality for everybody who's listening, but rather to see that life is just way too short to play it safe and to play it small while we let our life pass by us as a result. And the answer, as we move into, how do we kind of break free from that, is you kind of have to stop giving a shit. And I know that sounds so simple, it almost sounds cliche, but like whether you implement an authentic change right now, whether you pursue an emotional freedom right now or not, it's going to catch up to you eventually. Eventually you're going to grow so tired of performing. Eventually you're going to grow so tired of this nonsensical game. And you're going to see that so many years have passed by and we have lived so many of those years in fear of what others will think of us. And you realize the whole time, this thing that we're fearing, this thing that we're avoiding, isn't real. It isn't real. And people do not care that much. Even the people that care about you very, very much don't care about you as much as your anxiety will lead you to believe, to the point where they're constantly analyzing your behaviors and all of your negative tendencies. The slight stutter or the a little bit blinking a little bit too quick. People don't notice that, and you have to get out of your own head about it and just live life, because truly, who cares? Who cares? If the price of feeling happy, if the price of feeling free and existing in authentic, genuine, real relationships and living your life in a real way, if the price of that is whatever opinions people may have, that's a very small price to pay, in my opinion. It's actually a very small price to pay. We are afforded the luxury of living life in a certain way where, for many, survival needs have been met. And I get these comments all the time, and I try not to address them too much. But yes, this is assuming that survival needs have been met. You do have food, water, and shelter. But of course, we are fortunate that this is a problem and not anything else. And I'm not saying this to undermine the process. This isn't to compare any sort of suffering in any way. I actually think that this fear that is representative of a past trauma is actually one of the more valid hurdles, because it is something that we've learned to do in the past, and it's something based on experiences that our mind has observed in reality that we have now formed into a belief system. So I don't want you to think that you're the only one dealing with this, and actually a lot of people deal with this particular issue, and really it just exists on a spectrum. And the more you kind of dig into this whole thing, rather than just being kind of abrasive about it. And what I mean by that is, someone on the lower side of the spectrum probably has it, but they still just go out and socialize, and they realize that, a bit of perspective anxiety from other people when they're giving a speech or anything is relatively normal. They still fall on the spectrum. There still is an emotional freedom that can be had, but not as much as someone who's further down the spectrum, who is kind of just always analyzing every interaction or always analyzing anything like that. And if you are in that boat right now, what I would say is you might find it hard to escape the loop of analyzing that conversation or constantly, trying to decipher what they think about you. The point isn't to stop those thoughts from happening, but rather let the thoughts of judgment, let the thoughts of, oh, they don't like you, oh, they make fun of you, whatever it is, actually let those thoughts just hang out there. Don't try to push them away, because when you push them away, they often come back a little bit stronger. Let those thoughts kind of linger, and still create the separation between you and the belief that that's happening, and tell yourself, whether or not that's happening, it's still a small price to pay for me existing in the emotional freedom, for me being happy in life. And you have to tell yourself, to be honest, I don't care. I really don't care anymore. I really don't. And if it comes about that our worst fears, that they were really judging you and they said all these mean things about you, even if that were the case, this is almost never the case, by the way, but even if this were the case, it'll hurt your feelings for a bit. But if you psychoanalyze consistently and completely, then the only thing that's going to happen is you're going to keep robbing your experience of life. Having your feelings hurt is a part of life as well. I'm not sure why I don't see that many people mention that. And feeling embarrassed is a part of life. And feeling a little bit cringe when putting yourself out there or trying a new thing is a part of life. Not knowing what someone thinks about you is a part of life. These things are a part of life. They're not meant to be avoided. And what happens is we're now living in a time where everyone is trying to avoid that. But those things are a part of life. They help you grow. They make you genuine, and they ground you, so you can actually have a conversation with someone and you can be real at a subconscious level, in this weird way that we're all communicating unconsciously. You say, I'm not judging you. I'm not trying to be better than you. I'm just existing, and you can do with that as you wish. That's the sort of mindset I think we need to have when we're trying to approach life genuinely and authentically and try to be the most real that we can. Is you say, this is just me. I'm just existing. And whatever you want to do with your opinions and whatever you want to do with your judgments, that's your thing. That's your thing. I'm just going to be me. I'm just going to exist. And I see that you are existing as well. And that is it. That's the basis of the reality. Everything we add on top of it is kind of this diluted sense of who has the higher status, whose time is more important, you know, and when is enough enough? If you decide to play that game of status, if you decide to play that game of I'm better than you, you're eventually going to run into a crisis. You're going to run into a wall. This is what we see with a lot of people, whether that be fame or status, whatever it might be, where you can't help but ask yourself, when is enough enough? And eventually they do reach that point, and they start to have a identity crisis because they've formed their entire identity and existence on the fact of being better than a majority of people, being more important than a majority of people, being cooler than a majority of people, being more talented than a majority of people. But who cares? Who cares? The more status you have, the harder it is to know if people actually like you for who you are. So why not just be real? And whatever falls away always did. And whatever strengthens is going to be an amazing privilege worth experiencing. Real friendships, real relationships, real bonds, these things are special and these things are worthy. And we can't have them if we're going to play this status game where we're always trying to be something that we're not. We always can offer ourselves, and that is all we can do. You're just existing. I'm just existing. We are all just existing. And all the added accoutrements on top are imaginary. They're a game that we play. And what you'll see is when two people are deeply connected, they're not playing that game anymore. When two people, whether it be friends or anything else, when two people are truly, enjoying each other's company, they're not playing that game anymore. Whereas superficial relationships are always playing that game. As soon as one person stops portraying a certain image of themselves, as soon as one person, differs the aesthetic of what the other person got with them for or was spending time with them for, then it falls apart. Rather than if you just offer yourself as an individual and someone accepts that and someone enjoys spending time with you, then there's nothing else to it. There's no faking you have to do. There's no charades that you have to play. You're just being a human. That person's just being a human, and you're enjoying the human experience together. So when we're looking to be that version of ourselves that we were when we were younger, that free-flowing version of us, there's many things that often, I think, instigate this from happening. Oftentimes, it's a very fulfilling relationship that makes you feel seen, and so you feel more comfortable allowing the world to see you. But I actually don't think we have to wait for that. There's things that we can do right now, and that is to stop caring, obviously, and to realize that people's judgments are theirs, and people are always going to be judging. And you could be the quietest person in the room, and everyone will be judging you. You could be the loudest person in the room, and no one will judge you, and vice versa. So it doesn't really matter. It's a zero-sum game if you really look at it. And the way to freedom is practicing to not care again and again and again. Walking into a room and telling yourself, I really don't care. I really don't care what they think. I really do not care. It takes so much energy. It creates so much anxiety. I really do not care. Because the end result would have been the same. If I would have faked being someone I'm not, then all that would happen is I would be prolonging a result that would have happened in the first place. Who cares? The people who are constantly judging others are miserable, trust me. That's where something like that is birthed from. Only those who are unsatisfied with their lives feel the need to diminish others and judge others. If you create a life that you're satisfied with, that starts with just being yourself, with just existing, with, allowing that inner child in a way to come through and just, without all the defense mechanisms, without all the anxiety and avoidant behaviors, just exist, just be you. Doesn't matter where you are, just be you. You don't have to be this abrasive version of yourself. Just be you without all the avoidant behaviors and defense mechanisms. That's, I think, how we can find that light again, find that spark again, and see that life is too short to go about it any other way. That's it for today's episode, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I'm going to leave a link to my book down below if you want to check it out. I go into more stuff like this. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure to like and subscribe. If you're listening on Spotify, thank you for listening as always. And other than that, I will see you guys in the next one. Peace.